Perfect. I can hear you pretty well. So how are you today? Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So, Carlo Alvaro, first of all, tell our listeners about your personal story because I think it's a very inspiring story. You were born in a small town in the suburbs of Torino, Italy, and you decided to move to the United States without any academic title. And then what happened?
Well, that's a long story. How much time do we? Okay, so let's start. So okay, so we do it in English, not in Italian.
Yeah, that's
I hope the Italians understand. Well,
they do, yeah.
so as you mentioned, I grew up in a small town, but not that small, but it's a small town in the province of Turin,
Mm-hmm.
um, and Niccolino.
Mm-hmm.
That's the name of the town. I went to school there. Uh, nothing exciting. Well, typical kid growing up in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
80s and 90s. Went to school, middle school. Then when I was in Italy, I don't know if you remember this. It was mandatory for males to go to the army, to serve in the army.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
served in the army, and I think I was at that point when I was 18 years old. I didn't
Mhm.
know what I wanted to do with my life, so I experimented. I signed up and I stayed an additional year in the army. So I served for 2 years in the paratroopers, and after which I left and I'm and I regret even serving in the army because it was not a good experience. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Mhm.
So at that point, I I had finished middle school and
Mhm.
started high school before the army. This is before the army. Okay. Um, but high school didn't go well. So I didn't finish it. I never finished high school, essentially.
Mhm.
I attended a high school for graphic arts
Mhm.
for about 6 months. Then I decided to get a job. I
Mhm.
worked. I was at that time I was passionate about photography.
Mm.
By the way, if you hear some noises because I'm in a teacher's lounge
That's
right
okay.
now.
No
So
problem.
at that time, I was passionate about photography. So I got a I got a job in a photo studio. Where I developed photos. I took some pictures. I thought I wanted to be a photographer,
Mhm.
but that didn't work out. Okay, so I moved on. Then there's the army. I come back from the army, and I start working with but different kinds of jobs. Um, and the main one was in a factory. So I worked in a factory.
Mhm.
This is the type of factory you see in the movies, big factory with these long assembly lines, metalwork industry with fire and noise and smoke, that kind of stuff. That you have to work with earplugs for 8 hours a day,
Sure.
and that was essentially my experience of hell on
Mm.
earth.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, in that factory, if you're curious, it's a factory that I think it closed down now.
Oh.
It's the name is Farragut. They make car wheels
Mhm.
for different car makes, whatever. And my job essentially was to stand in front of a big machine that molded these circles, these car wheels, just the wheel part, not
Mhm.
the tires. And I just have to for 8 hours I have to stare at this machine, making sure that it didn't do any misbehave, essentially.
Mhm.
So you can imagine a person like me, eight
A
hours.
creative person, right?
Yeah,
You are creative.
I I hated that.
Yeah.
But if you're from Italy and
Mhm.
and you left Italy for the same reason, I guess, similar reasons, because Italy
Yeah. Similar, yeah.
not allow you to express yourself in many different ways. It's beautiful. Sure, we hear about
It is.
the sun and the beach and this and whatever. But
Mhm.
it doesn't allow you to express yourself.
Not great opportunities, though.
Exactly. Not great,
Yeah.
especially in education, because I could not have done what I've done here in the States. So,
Mhm.
so at one point, I decided to leave. To
Mhm.
change, well, I decided to change my life. Let's put it this way. And so I guess I thought I have two options if I want to change my life. One is I say I change job, I get another job. I live in the same town, or maybe I move to a different town. That's an option. The other option is if you really want to change your life, you have to change everything. And I mean
Mhm.
it. And I did. So I started started toying with the idea of leaving Italy altogether. And for years, I had the idea of the United States. I like the culture. I know
Mhm.
there are a lot of things that
Mhm.
they're not very positive, but still, I like the idea, this idea of lots of opportunities, more opportunities
Mhm.
than you get,
Mhm.
and uh, and the idea of living in a giant metropolis like New York City, right?
Yeah,
Where
that's where you live now, right?
exactly where
Okay.
I live in Manhattan right now.
Manhattan. Oh.
Yes, and I teach in Brooklyn,
Mhm.
University in Brooklyn. We're going to talk about that later. Yes.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
So you are assistant professor of philosophy, right?
yes,
At New
yeah,
York College of Technology.
New York City College of Technology. It's
Okay.
the university of the
Mhm.
city of New York.
Great. Great.
Yeah. In 2000, around 2001, I
Mhm.
was ready to take the big step to
Mhm.
leave Italy for good, and it took me a couple of years to get everything together,
Yeah.
and in 2003, beginning of 2003, I finally decided, and I came here. I came here. I have to say, um, probably in retrospect, I have to say it was not a great idea because I did not organize anything. I mean, I
Mm.
didn't plan anything. I didn't have a plan A or plan B, or I had zero plan.
Whatever. Zero
I
plan. Wow.
purchased a ticket, a flight, came here, and I
And see
started
what
living,
happens.
and living here. Okay. Now I have to mention that
Very brave.
I already had a green card, so
Mm-hmm.
that was not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And but other than that, I had, as we say in Italian, no
Mm-hmm.
ne arte ne parte. I had no. I didn't finish high school.
Mm-hmm.
I, essentially, I didn't know. I didn't have a profession. Okay. Um, so for a couple of years, I worked in restaurants, Italian restaurants, so as a server, a waiter, also
Mm-hmm.
worked as a manager, and um, and then I guess I have to say it was my wife who probably was instrumental in
Mm-hmm.
my decision to go back to college, get an
Mm-hmm.
education, and eventually become a professor.
Mm-hmm.
So my
So
wife,
she pushed you to study,
she pushed me because she realized
mm,
that
that it was
that I could
necessary.
had the potential to do something,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that might be, whether uh, go to school and get
Mm-hmm.
a higher degree.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the problem was I didn't have a high school diploma,
Mm-hmm.
so I had to get a GED, what is called a general equivalency diploma.
Yeah.
I did that. That was easy,
Mm-hmm.
and I immediately applied to college,
Mm-hmm.
which, by the way, is the same college where I now teach. I was a
Oh,
student here. Yes. In fact, I remember
so what was your major?
my major. Okay, my first major
Mm.
was legal studies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's because I applied to different colleges and I was admitted to this college. This college did not have a major in philosophy, so I had to major in something that I was interested in, which was legal studies. After 2 years, I finished my program, my associate degree program. After which I changed college. I went to the City College of New York. Still, it's CUNY College, the University of New York, where they have philosophy major. And so I majored in philosophy. Got a bachelor's degree in philosophy. In the meantime, I was working. I was teaching or tutoring. So as I mentioned, I worked in the restaurants for a couple of years. I worked in a bank. I did different jobs, and finally, when I started going to college, I also started tutoring. So I started as an English tutor, and then I became an adjunct professor of philosophy. Meantime, I got my bachelor's degree. Then I applied to graduate school. I applied to Queens College, where I got a master's degree in liberal studies. Then my second master's degree was in philosophy. I went to the New School, so I got a master's there at the New School in philosophy. And then I continued it there at the New School, where I finally got my doctorate degree, my PhD in philosophy. And I specialize in ethics, moral philosophy. And my dissertation was, in fact, a work on animal ethics. I'm very interested in ethics, but especially in animal ethics. And then that led me to work in nutrition science, in ethical veganism, and I published.
Okay, that's today's topic.
Okay,
so
that's essentially the end of the story. So
great achievements. Congratulations. Congratulations. So tell us more about your latest book, Raw Veganism: The Philosophy of the Human Diet.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a funny story because my first book was also on veganism. The title has veganism, but most of the book I talk about the philosophy of Aristotle. Philosophy, the moral philosophy of Aristotle is known as virtue ethics. It's an ethical view according to which we have to learn, and we have to acquire certain virtues like compassion, modesty, justice, and so on. And at that time, when I wrote my first book, I noticed that there were no academic works that coupled veganism, ethical veganism, and virtue ethics. So I wrote that book, very academic book. Now, when say 6 months later, after the publication of my first book, I wanted to write a book, but not an academic book. I wanted to write what is known as a trade book. In other words, I wanted to write a book not for academics, but for the wider audience. And the topic would be my own experience as a vegan, because, as you mentioned, actually you didn't mention, but the title of my book speaks for itself. I am what is known as a raw vegan. In other words, it's not a very weird thing to think about. A raw vegan is a person who does not consume any cooked food, any bread or rice or pasta or any steamed or cooked vegetables. Okay, I only eat salad and fruit, and nothing else. That's my diet.
But why are you against microwaves and ovens? Is there a specific reason? Just to save electricity, or there's something else?
Well, that's a good point. Well, saving electricity is a good thing, but That's not the motivation.
Mm.
I think it's at this point we have overwhelming research, scientific research, that shows that when you cook something,
Mm-hmm.
You do not improve it. I mean, you can say we can exchange ideas, and you can say to me, well, but maybe this idea here, that idea there. But on this idea, there's no question about it. I don't think anyone has any question about it. So first of all, so there are two aspects. One is when you cook food, you don't improve it in any way, shape, or form. You
Well,
destroy.
you kill microbes.
Well, if there are microbes,
it's not needed. It's not needed, maybe for vegetables, and
yeah.
if you wash carefully, it's okay. That's what you mean,
right? But my point is, what I mean is that you don't improve food in a sense that, for example, you take something so simple as orange, orange juice. Now you go to the store and you buy orange juice. Typically, the orange juice, unless you buy it fresh and squeezed, that orange juice is going to be pasteurized.
Yeah, pasteurized.
Which means that they have to bring it to a certain temperature to kill bacteria.
Yeah.
Now, as you know, when you heat up a fruit or vegetable, what happens is that immediately vitamin C is destroyed.
Yeah.
So what happens? The juice, the bottle that you buy of orange juice, they have to inject vitamin C because it's completely destroyed. Also, for example, proteins, amino acids, when you heat up some food, what happens is, I mean, I'm sure you know that proteins are everywhere. Watermelon has proteins.
Yeah, and vegetables.
Has proteins. Everything has proteins. Proteins is a word in Latin that means the primary food. It's everywhere. Grass has proteins, right? So what happens when you heat up, when you cook proteins? Well, they denature. That's a scientific term. It's called denature because you break down the bonds and you mess up their structure. That is not a good thing. So you don't improve any food by cooking it. Now now of course you can say, you might observe this, that when you cook food, you make more calories available, because if you eat a potato raw, it's going to give you first of all, it's hard to digest or impossible to digest. But if you cook it, it will give you a certain amount of calories. So that is a positive thing. Sure, it is positive if you're starving to death. And that's why human beings cooked food. I mean, I don't think that there's any other reason. We come from the jungle. We ate whatever we found on trees or bushes. And at one point, we were starving because we didn't have food. Agriculture didn't exist. I'm talking about 20 or 30, 50,000 years ago, before the invention of agriculture. What do we have to do? We had to cook food. We have to cook grains. Especially grains are important because you can transport grains. They don't die, they don't perish. You can move miles and miles with those grains, and you cook them and you can eat them. And you don't starve. You don't have to starve. And that's the reason why we cooked food. We were starving. But nowadays, with the abundance of fresh fruit and vegetables that we have, in my view, there's no reason to eat cooked food. Cooked food is not going to improve your health. It's not going to improve the food. So I don't eat it. That's the reason.
Okay. So I'm curious to learn more also about iron intake and veganism. Is, in your opinion, a vegan diet okay for women, for pregnant women? Do you get enough iron and B12 vitamin from vegetable sources? Or do you need to supplement? Or what's your experience? What's your personal experience as a
first of all,
vegan.
First of all, I'll tell you the science aspect of it, and then my personal experience.
Okay.
So, a couple of years ago, the American Dietetic Association published an important study. The study concludes that a vegan diet, now let's define veganism. A vegan diet is a diet completely devoid of any animal products or insect products. So no honey, no milk, no eggs, no cheese, no animal products, no meat. Okay? And the American Dietetic Association found that a vegan diet completely devoid of animal products is optimal. Not only optimal, but also recommended to all stages of life. So I'm not speaking about this. You can say you're biased because you're vegan. No, this is but think about it. This is very important. The American Dietetic Association is not a vegan or a vegetarian association.
Mm-hmm.
The same doctors, the same scientists, the same researchers that published this research are people who eat meat. Okay, and they came up with the conclusion that it's not only recommended, it's not only optimal, but also recommended to any stage of life, whether you are pregnant, whether you're a child, whether you're an elderly person. A proper vegan diet is recommended. Now, let me explain something. If you decide to eat French fries and drink beer and wine every day, so your diet essentially is French fries, let's say
alcohol,
bread, and alcohol. By definition, you are a vegan because alcohol, assuming that the alcohol was not obtained from in any way from animal sources. Okay, so if the alcohol that you're drinking is vegan, which is easy to be vegan, right? And bread and French fries and beer, you are a vegan. No animal products, you're a vegan. Now the question is, are you going to thrive on a diet like that? Certainly not. So when we talk about veganism, you have to qualify what you're talking about, because you can be a vegan and eat French fries and drink wine every day, or you can be a vegan and eat only bread, or you can be a vegan and eat only vegetables. You can be all kinds of vegans. So there are many possibilities. Now, there are a lot of people who fail. They try veganism, doesn't work for them, they get sick. So you hear all the stories that you asked me about, the iron, the deficiency, the supplement, right? If you have to supplement, it means that your diet is not
balanced.
Enough, right? Not well balanced. So sure, that's a problem. That's why many people try to be vegans and have problems because they don't know how to do it. But if you have a balanced diet, why should you worry about iron deficiency or any deficiencies? I mean, after all, cows eat grass all day and they have no deficiencies. Apparently, they manage to get everything that they need. But all of a sudden, when it comes to human beings, we're worried about this, we're worried about that. We're worried about, for example, the omega fatty acids, right, that you find in blueberries. You can eat a pack of blueberry and get your
I didn't know that.
you can eat some nuts, walnuts, and get the omega.
Yeah, walnuts. Yeah.
Why should you worry about eating meat or eating fish when you can eat nuts, when you can eat seeds, you can eat fresh fruit, blueberries, watermelon? Now, on the personal side, my personal experience.
So is your family vegan as well?
I have been a vegan for over 20 years. Okay. My wife, when I met my wife, she was a vegan. I have to say, I would not marry a woman who is not vegan. I'm that crazy. And so we raised our children as vegans.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife was pregnant when she was a vegan when she was pregnant. My children never had meat or animal products ever in their entire lives. Um, I have three children. I have two boys and a girl. My oldest one is a high school student. He is an athlete.
Wow.
He, yeah, he does fencing. He's
Mm-hmm.
also a musician. He performed at the Metropolitan New York,
Wow.
played piano, drums, and he currently attends. I'm sure you know the famous um, high school, LaGuardia High School, for
Mm.
performing
Mm-hmm.
arts. Yes, my middle son is also a musician. He is a runner, competitive runner, and my daughter also is a runner and a musician. They all play music in my family. My wife too. My wife is a singer.
You used
And,
to play saxophone,
I used to play
right?
sax. Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
was a musician too,
Wow.
and
And your
drum.
wife is a sing is a singer?
She's a
Opera?
singer and a piano opera singer. Yes,
Opera. Wow.
yes. And I used to be a competitive athlete. I used to run marathons. Um, so this is my personal experience. And in my personal experience, in fact, it's the opposite of what they tell you. If you
Mm.
really want to thrive, if you really want to succeed as a person, if you want to feel well,
Mm.
function well as a person, think well, write well, this is what I do. I teach, I write books, I, I am a father, I have a family, and
So do you regularly have blood works and they are all
yeah,
okay?
yes,
Wow.
every year.
Okay.
Every year they're okay.
Okay.
They're not, I'm sorry, they're not okay. I don't like the way you put it. They're not okay. Okay means they're okay. They're
I
not okay.
mean, no deficiency,
They are,
no
they
red flags.
stellar. Not okay.
Hmm.
Because my very doctor says to me, I don't understand why there's nothing wrong with you.
Hmm.
I keep saying to her, why do you expect to find anything wrong with me? So, so for example, my doctor is very thorough. She's worried about the fact that I'm vegan. So every year she had me tested for B12
Hmm.
because there's this idea that if you're a vegan, your B12 is low. Well, my B12 is not low. What about iron? My iron is fine. It's not okay, Viviana. Not
Hmm.
okay. It's wonderful.
Oh,
Okay. Um, everything is wonderful. There is no one thing, not one
cholesterol.
cholesterol. It's not even. It doesn't even apply to me. Cholesterol, triglycerides, cholesterol. There's nothing that looks okay. Everything
Mm.
is good. Everything is
Hmm.
wonderful. Not good, wonderful. Not even one problem. Now I might die tomorrow, after this interview, and so look, you said that you were healthy. No, no concerns. Same thing applies to my wife. Same thing applies to my children.
Okay, so speaking of children, did you write about the children's proper nutrition and development, right?
Yeah,
Articles about
one of
that?
my articles last year, I published an article about children, vegan children and nutrition. In that article, I also talk about because when you talk about health, you have to talk about also mental health. Okay,
Hmm.
so psychological aspect too, and the social aspect of children. So I talk about both things, but with regard to the nutrition aspect, I talk about several things. About to talk about B12, talk about vitamin D, um, and amino acids, proteins, and the fatty acids. Those are the big concerns.
Hmm.
And essentially, if you want to hear the story, essentially, one curious thing is
Hmm.
that when you look at when you survey vegans and meat eaters, you notice something very interesting, that meat eaters, as well as vegans, have low B12. Isn't it interesting? Now, after all, I don't have to tell you this. You don't have to believe me. I mean, just think about a fact. The pharmaceutical industry produces tons and tons of B12.
Mm-hmm.
I hope
synthetic.
but that's besides the point.
Mm-hmm.
My point is the following. I hope you don't think that all the B12 produced by the pharmaceutical industry is for the vegans, because vegans are what, 1% of the population?
Mm-hmm.
They make B12 for meat eaters as well. So what's the story here? Well, the story is that low B12 has nothing to do with veganism.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you are a vegan and automatically you have low B12. There are several reasons for low B12. Let me mention a few. One reason is that your iodine is low. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And why is the iodine low? Well, there are other reasons. Okay. So typically, if your iodine is low, that's why for example, they supplement salt, table salt, with iodine.
Mm-hmm.
They have iodized salt for that reason, because it's hard for some people to get enough iodine. And what happens is B12, the level of B12 lowers as the iodine is low.
Mm.
Another reason is, believe it or not, think about this. Drinking, let me backtrack for a moment. What is B12 essentially? B12 is not really a vitamin. We call it vitamin, but essentially is bacteria. It's a byproduct of bacteria. Okay. So if you kill that bacteria, obviously you kill B12. Your B12 lowers. Now, what kills that bacteria? Coffee, alcohol, antibiotics, medicine, and excessively, say things like, for example, lemon.
Lemon?
Excessive intake. Talking about.
Okay.
A lot of things there are like vinegar. Okay. Acid. They're acidic. Okay. As you know, our body is not acidic, right? And so anything that is acidic, too much acidic food, also causes lower B12. Now, the next thing, vitamin D. Vitamin D, as you know, the sun provides vitamin D. What happens is the sun rays hit the fat cells, the fat in the cells of your skin, and produce a byproduct, which is vitamin D, vitamin D3. Now, let's begin with the idea that you can buy vitamin D if you're really worried about vitamin D. And it's not derived from an animal source. Secondly, if you're really worried about it, you can expose your skin to the sun. What do you do in the winter?
Or eat mushrooms, right?
Well, some mushrooms, white mushrooms, if they are organic and they're wild. If they're cultivated, not so much. But if they're wild and they absorb the sun rays, they have vitamin D. Now, another thing to understand is that vitamin D stays in the body for a while. So if you get a good amount of vitamin D during winter, then you're covered during winter. And then the next summer, you sunbathe and you take more vitamin D. So there's no reason to believe that we have to drink milk or eat cheese.
Salmon, fatty fish.
No, not at all. Now, talking about fatty fish and fatty acids, omega-3s, omega-6s. Why do you need to eat fish when you can get the fatty acids, the omega-3s, the omega-6s, and in an amount which is optimal, okay? From seeds, nuts, fruit. As I said, as I mentioned earlier, blueberries have omega-3s. You don't need to eat a fish. Now, you can say, well, but the fish, I like it. Well, fine. If you like it, eat it. Fine. But you have to worry about the mercury. You have to worry about the saturated fats. You have to worry about the fact that a lot of research shows that higher intake of fish also is linked to higher risk of cancer. So why should I even contemplate eating a food that is probably, possibly giving me cancer? It's not, no question at all. If you show me any research that says that blueberries might cause cancer
Harm you.
or harm you in any way, then we can talk about it. But that's not the case. The fact is that fruit, especially raw fruit and raw greens, don't harm you. They do the opposite. They benefit you. That's the end of the story. So everything, proteins, another thing about proteins. Proteins, there's a misconception about proteins that, number one, that we need an enormous amount of proteins. And by the way, the average person, I speak to people all the time when I give speeches or lectures. People say to me, well, what about the proteins? But the person who asks that question does not have in mind a precise amount of proteins. Because when I ask, but what do you mean we need a lot of proteins? How much are we talking about? Or, well, I don't know. This study says this much, that study says that much. The truth is that we don't know how much proteins we need. Okay, there are some studies done on rats, studies, and you come up with certain numbers. But look, the point is, you don't need not worry about proteins. You need to worry about calories. Okay, so your body, for example, in order to maintain your weight, let's say that you require 1,500 calories or 2,000 calories a day. Okay, that's the only thing that you have to worry about, unless you want to lose weight, of course. But once you have the calories coming from a healthful food, meaning blueberries, bananas, fruit, lots of vegetables, some grains possibly. I don't eat them, but I don't recommend them, but some grains, fine. Then you, as long as you get the calories required to survive, then you cover all the requirements of vitamins and minerals and the proteins and so on. Why should you think that you needed this enormous amount of proteins? And how much? You need as much as you need, as your body needs to, because you have to think about this, that why does the body need proteins? Well, essentially the body doesn't really need proteins. You need amino acids. The protein is broken down into amino acids by your body. And let's say that there's something going on in your body. Amino acids essentially repair, they fix problems in your body, they transport food. So they have a lot of functions, amino acids. But it's not that some people think that you take a walk in the park, okay? Then you go home and, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Now I need a lot of proteins to go back to my muscles. It doesn't work that way. You eat food, and the amino acids that you find in blueberries and watermelon and broccoli, okay, they will repair the damages. They will transport the food. They will do the job, the same job that the proteins that you get from meat does. Problem when you get the proteins from the meat, you also get the possibility of getting bowel cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, not to mention the fact that meat is not easy to digest. It might be good, I don't know. Those who eat meat, obviously they like the taste, but certainly they can't deny that it's a very heavy, it takes a long time for the body, and that's why you feel tired, because the body takes a long time to digest. Not a good idea.
All right. Thank you so much. It's a very, very interesting topic. We're going to play some Italian music and we're going to be back soon. Thank you.
With me? No, not with me.